Good morning, esteemed teachers, students, and distinguished guests. My name is Shifali, and I'm pursuing my final year in TYBA with specialization in English. Today is the beginning of our new lecture series titled Dialogues. This series, crafted by the English department, will not only enhance current students but also past students too, since these lecture will be streaming on official YouTube channel of Ahmednagar College. Our esteemed plan of speakers for the series will draw a fields related to English language and literature. Therefore, I am thrilled to introduce our first speaker, a distinct scholar, former head of the department at Ahmednagar College, Dr. Simon Barnabas. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all present here and those who are virtually joining via the official YouTube channel of Ahmednagar College, Department of English. Before we move forward, I request Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt, Sir, the head of department, to give the introductory address to the session.
Thank you, Shefali. Shefali has already mentioned what this is all about. We are very happy to um, launch this series of dialogues. Uh, the primary purpose, of course, is to create an opportunity for the students to listen to diverse experts. You get bored listening to us every day in the class, so we thought we'll bring in other experts from different places, from different fields, even from different subjects also in the future. And we have with us Dr. Simon Barnabas, who is a very dear friend of the department, being our former head of the department and a very renowned scholar of English and the English language and American literature. So, Simon sir, it's really, really nice to have you back with us. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy that our the department's YouTube channel lectures will be beginning with a lecture by you. So with that, friends, I will hand it over to Shefali, or who is it? Jessica? Yeah, Jessica will introduce her.
Good morning, all. It's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to the first guest lecture today on Standard English as a part of series Dialogues on the behalf of our English department and introduce you to our esteemed guest of honor and speaker, Dr. Simon Barnabas. I will share some highlights of his professional journey. He retired as the head of the Department of English of our college after 30 years of serving in the college. He was the vice principal of the college for 4 years. Simon Sir is a scholar with multiple specializations, such as American literature, linguistics, and ELLT. He has published many research articles and textbooks. He was also a member of Board of Studies for English of Pune University. He has supervised 10 PhD students. He has taken up many teaching assignments even after his retirement. So, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Simon Barnabas.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Shafali. Can I begin now, or can I begin now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Uh, Good morning, everybody, and I would like to thank Shafali and Jessica for those wonderful words of welcome and introduction. And I am also thankful to Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt and his colleagues in the department for organizing this kind of a lecture series. And I feel really honored because I have been given the chance to speak to you first. So I consider it as an honor, and I thank you for that. Now, today, I would like to speak on the topic standard English. And because we have only 45 minutes or so, I would only like to introduce to you the concept of standard English rather than going into uh, the details of standard English and how uh, it's being looked at by different people belonging to different branches of knowledge. Now, I presume that most of the students belong to Maharashtra and some may be from other states also. Those who are living in Maharashtra or even those who come from other parts of India, uh, we have our own mother tongues. So in Maharashtra, we have Marathi as the mother tongue. But Marathi is the mother tongue of a large number of people living in Maharashtra. But we know that Marathi is not spoken in the same way in all regions of Maharashtra. For example, Marathi is spoken in a peculiar way in the Konkan region. It is spoken in a peculiar way in Kolhapur region, Vidarbha region, Marathwada region. So, in all these regions, we notice some kind of a difference. The language is Marathi, but in these different regions, Marathi is being used or Marathi is being spoken in a slightly different manner. But that doesn't mean that a person coming from the Konkan region will not be understood by a person from Kolhapur region or from Vidarbha region or from Marathwada region. Of course, you notice some difference in the pronunciation, in the intonation, the tone of the speaker's voice. So these are some of the things that we notice. So these are all these are different forms of Marathi. They are not different languages, but these are different forms of Marathi. This is a peculiarity of all the languages of the world. If you have a language in a particular geographical region, within that region you will have different forms of the language, just as we have different forms of Marathi uh, in Maharashtra. Now, if you come to if I take my example, the Malayalam language, I would say that Malayalam is spoken in a particular way in the southern part of Kerala, central Travancore, and the northern part of Kerala and the eastern regions of Kerala. Now, these are all Malayalam, but or Marathi for that matter. But you see slight differences in pronunciation, especially, and also in the tone. And sometimes you find some differences in the use of certain words. Now, these variations or these are all different varieties of the language. Therefore, if you come across a peculiar way of using Marathi or Malayalam in a particular region, it is called a regional form of the language. So, Konkan region has its own form of Marathi. Kolhapur region has its own form of Marathi. These are all different forms of the same language called Marathi or Malayalam. And they are not different languages. Why are they not different languages? They are not different languages because people belonging to these different regions, when they speak, they easily understand what the speakers are saying. There is no problem of unintelligibility here. And therefore, we say that these are different forms of the same language depending on different regions. So when we have different forms of language depending on different regions, we call them dialects, Dialects. So dialects are basically the different forms of the same language, different forms of the same language. And I would like to say that wherever a language is spoken, wherever a language is spoken, and if we have a considerable number of people to speak that language, then this form of or these kinds of variations are visible. and that is the case of all languages. Now, because of these regional variations, we call them, dialects, not different languages. Different forms of the language according to region, they are called dialects of the same language. As I told you, people speaking the different dialects of the same language have no problem in understanding each other and understanding one another, and therefore they are not different languages, but they are different forms of the same language called dialects. And these regional variations are a characteristic feature of most of the languages. And one more thing I want to say is that these dialectal differences will be most prominent in the areas of pronunciation and in the case of some vocabulary items. Okay, and it is in these two areas that you find differences. One is pronunciation and intonation, suprasegmental features, and then on the other hand, you have some vocabulary items. Now, I shall clarify this with an example from my language. Say, for example, the place where I am living, if I want to say no in Malayalam, I say illa. I say illa if I want to say no in Malayalam. But if you go to northern Kerala, you will notice that illa is not pronounced illa, but it will be pronounced illia. Illia. Okay, so when you hear that, there is, a person who is well versed with the dialects of Malayalam will be able to understand that this person is from, could be from this area. And similarly, there are some vocabulary items. There are some vocabulary items which are, different in different regions of Kerala. So it's mainly in the area of pronunciation and intonation that we find these dialectal differences, but we may also find some differences in the use of vocabulary items. But syntactic and semantic features, that is sentence structure and grammar, will not be vastly different. Okay, so there won't be much difference in the use of grammar in these dialectal areas, and that is why it is easy for us to understand each other no matter from which region we come or which dialect of the same language we happen to hear. And therefore, dialectal differences are there, but then dialectal differences will not cause any problem of unintelligibility. And that is something that I would like to say about dialects. Now, let us move a little further and look at Hindi. And we know Hindi is spoken in different parts of our country. Okay, it is spoken in almost all the states, but you see the vast difference in the use of Hindi in different areas. Say, for example, people from Bengal, people from the Northeast, people from South India, people from Central India, and people from northern parts of India. So how they speak Hindi, you come across a large varieties of English. Okay, a large number of varieties you find Hindi. But still, we understand each other. We understand each other because they are all different forms of the same language called Hindi. Okay, so it is pronounced differently, and the words used may be slightly different here and there, but still, there is no problem of intelligibility there, and people always, understand. Although sometimes it may create a little bit of problem because of intonation, but as I have already said, these are all different forms of the same language, or these are the dialects of the language called Hindi, and they vary according to regions. Okay, and I have listed the regions: the Northeast, the South India, Central India, northern parts of India. So in all these areas, Hindi is spoken in different ways, used in different ways, but still we understand each other. Okay, now this is the case of Hindi, and we know it is spread across our country. But let us move further to the English language. When we move on to the English language, we notice that English is spoken in a vast area of land. Okay, or I would say in different countries, over 100 countries. Okay, so in all these 100 countries, English, or more than 100 countries, English is being spoken. And if you listen to the English that is being spoken by people belonging to different countries, different regions, different areas, you will always find that there are differences. Okay, there are differences. So let us take the case of India. In India also we have the English language. all over India. And we always, especially if you read some of the books written by R.K. Bensal, Balasubramaniam, and many others, and these are people who have written books on phonetics and spoken English, they would always say that, in different regions of India, within India, you have different varieties of English. Say, for example, you have Malayali English, you have Tamil English, you have UP English, you have, Gujarati English, and we have different forms of English, you know. But then, these are only different forms, regional variations, and but the language is the same, that is the English language. Now, although there are different dialects of the English language, now I will focus on the English language because that is what we are studying now, that is what we are trying to understand now. So, although English is spoken in different ways all over the world, they have their dialectal features. Indian English pronunciation features, we know. We know Indian English intonation patterns, we know. So we have our own English called regional variant of English called Indian English. But then, even in India and all over the world, you will find one form of English, one kind of English that cuts across all the dialectal boundaries, all over the world. And you will come across a peculiar kind of English, which is internationally intelligible, And that kind of English, which cuts across all dialectal boundaries, and which is understood easily all over the world, and which is frequently used all over the world, that form of English is called Indian English. Perhaps, when we are using the typical Indian English, sometimes it can create problems. Say, for example, in India, we often say a word like co-brother. Co-brother, my co-brother will be my wife's sister's husband. But this is a word which is not there in English. Similarly, in India, especially in the southern part of India, the word face cut, is something that is commonly used. Face cut means the shape of the face, but that's not English. Now, these kinds of words, there are many other words. There are many Sanskrit words which have come into our language. Say, for example, we always give the example of charan sparsh. Charan sparsh is not merely touching the feet. It has cultural meanings. It has cultural meanings. So when charan sparsh is translated into English, you say touching the feet, and a person who belongs to another country where this practice is not there, this custom is not there, he or she might find it difficult to understand what touching the feet means. Now, that's what I'm trying to say. So Indian English has certain features. Certain words, certain phrases, certain grammatical structures. Rarely, say, for example, instead of saying, where are you going? In India, we quite often hear where you are going. Okay. So, there are some such grammatical constructions and some vocabulary items and pronunciation, of course. So we have a form of English called Indian English, which is absolutely suitable for Indian situations. But then, even in India, we have we have a variety of English which cuts across all the dialectal boundaries, and then it sort of conforms to a standard form of English which is internationally understood, which is internationally intelligible. That form of English, which cuts across all kinds of dialectal boundaries and which is known all over the world and which is used widely all over the world, especially in the academic circles, that form of English is called, standard English. It won't have the features, the regional features. Okay, it won't have the regional features. So, in standard English form, you may not find a word like face cut, or you will not find a word like co-brother. Why? Because it doesn't have international currency. It has currency only within India. and therefore it may be used here. It may be used here, but it may not have that kind of acceptability at an international level. Therefore, even though we speak Indian English in our own country, there are people who use a kind of English as form of English that has, that has international intelligibility and international acceptability. Now, when we talk about standard English, there are two words which two phrases which we have to remember. One is educated speech, and the other is uneducated speech. Educated speech means it is the language of education, the language of education, and uneducated speech is the kind of speech. If I am taking Indian English again, the typical Indian form of English that we are using in our country, which has all the features of Indian English, and still we are communicating in that language, in that form of language, that form of English, and it is perfectly all right within India. But then educated English, that can be called uneducated speech. Okay, that can be called uneducated speech because it doesn't have international acceptability, but it has acceptability within our country, especially when common people are speaking in English. But educated speech is called the language of education. The language of education is the language that is used, that is used by what you call language that is used by uh, uh, people all over the world. Okay, people all over the world, and which has, as I told you a little earlier, international acceptability. International acceptability, I will explain this a little more. But then educated speech has sort of prestige. Okay, a sort of prestige, and this educated speech or the language of education is generally used in on certain public institutions. Okay, certain public institutions, say for example, the English language that we study in schools. Okay, the English language that we study in schools, in school textbooks, as far as possible, they contain that form of English which cuts across all dialectal boundaries. And if a textbook written in India is shown to a person from any part of the world, that English will be understood. Why? Because it is written in the form of in the standard English form. So it won't have the Indian English features in it and unacceptable words of Indian English in these textbooks. Of course, if the textbook contains a piece of writing by an Indian writer, who can frequently use such words and expressions. Say, for example, if you read Pulkraj Anand, for example, or Rajarao, for example, they have Indian usages, Indian expressions in their books. But other than that, if it is a proper lesson, it will be written in standard English. Okay, it will be written in standard English, and it won't have the typical Indian English features. Okay, Indian English features, the vocabulary items, certain grammar items, etc., etc. Now, so the educated speech, and now this has wide acceptance because certain public institutions use this. Okay, certain public institutions use this kind of standard English. Say, for example, the television. Okay, for example, national networks, radio, for example. Now, I'm not talking about the recent forms of radio where you have code switching, code mixing, etc., etc. I'm talking about, say, for example, Doordarshan. If you listen to the news on Doordarshan, or maybe on some other channels also, there they use this peculiar variety of English called standard English. And the press, okay, the press means newspapers, magazines, etc., etc., which also have a wide circulation. Okay, wide circulation. In this regard, I would say one thing, because for a long time, in England, the RP, the received pronunciation, was considered as the standard form of Britain. Okay, the standard English form. Okay, the standard English form in Britain. Why? Because that was used on the BBC. Okay, that was used on the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. And it has a wide audience all over the world. And that English used on BBC, that was considered to be the national standard of Britain. Okay, the national standard form of Britain. And those most of you are studying English phonetics. Now, that phonetics or those symbols and sounds which you are studying, they are also, the symbols and the symbols and sounds used in the RP, the received pronunciation, which is the national standard of Britain. Or, so, it had wide acceptability because it was used on the BBC. For a long time, BBC did not choose even reporters who would speak, any variety other than the RP, the received pronunciation variety. So, this way, institutions use, and educational institutions also, we use this kind of English, which is called standard English. So while, listening to these public forums or public institutions, while studying in colleges and schools, we develop this kind of standard English, which is internationally intelligible. Okay, which is internationally intelligible. Not that all people will be able to speak English, standard English. Even in England, a lot of people do not speak standard English, but they stick to their own regional forms of English. Okay, but then those people who are involved in academic writing, for example, those who are in the field of education, those who are, associated with the press, those who are associated with, national networks of television or whatever, they are using this kind of English, okay, which is called standard English. But in all countries, you have people who speak who use this kind of English called the standard English. Now, when you want to publish an article in an international journal, these journals would always, have certain stipulations about the usages, either British or American. But then they also insist on writing the article in a standard in the standard English form. Why? Because that's going to be read by a large number of people, and the magazine may have a large audience, and therefore, whatever you are writing, whatever you are publishing, no matter from which part of the world you come, that should be intelligible to all the readers, okay, all the readers across the world. And therefore, that form of English, which cuts across all regional boundaries, all regional characteristics, and which has international acceptability, that form of English is called standard English. Now, there are so many people who have conducted studies on standard English, okay, standard English. And one such scholar is a British scholar and a British linguist. His name is Peter Stevens. Not one. If you look up the bibliography for standard English, you will come across, hundreds of books. In fact, Peter Stevens has written a book on, British and American English. And we have so many Indian scholars who have written on English, okay, and the use of English in India, etc., etc. Okay, but that's not our concern for the time being. Now, Peter Stevens calls standard English the universal non-regional dialect. This is a phrase that Peter Stevens uses for the word standard English. What is standard English? He has used a phrase, and that phrase is the universal non-regional dialect. Look at this. 3 words: universal, non-regional, dialect. Why universal? Because standard English is used all over the world. Okay, all over the world. Therefore, it is universal. Okay, it is a part of educated speech, part of language of education. Therefore, it conforms to a world standard, and therefore it is universal. Okay, it is universal, used by educated people all over the world. Another thing is it is non-regional. Non-regional means it does not belong to any particular region. Standard English does not belong to any particular region. It doesn't have any regional feature. Okay, it doesn't have the Indian English feature. It doesn't have the American English feature. It doesn't have the Canadian English feature. It doesn't have the Singaporean English feature. It doesn't have any regional feature. Therefore, it is non-regional. And the other word is dialect. Okay, it is only a dialect, meaning it is only one variety of English. Okay, it is only one variety of English, and therefore it is considered as a dialect. Now, it has wide acceptance. That is one thing. But then, it is still considered as a dialect. Okay. Now, It has wide acceptance, as I told you. It has wide acceptance all over the world, and therefore it is being used. Okay, it is being used internationally. Okay. Now, what do you mean by standard? It is called standard English. If it is called standard English, what does the word standard in that mean? The word standard in standard English means used by the majority of people designated. Okay, used by the majority of people designated. This is again a phrase used by Peter Stevens. Now, in that explanation, okay, that is used by the majority of people designated, there is a word that is, or there is a phrase called people designated. Okay, who are these people designated? People designated are the people who are concerned with education, and with educated usage, and people who are concerned with writing literature. Now, I said that the word standard in standard English means used by the majority of people designated. Who are the people who are designated? People who are designated are people who are concerned with education, with educated usage and literature. Okay. Now, it is not. Now, who are these people who are designated? The people who are designated will include uh, grammarians, for example. Okay, those people who write grammar. The other thing is, the other people are the people who compile dictionaries. Okay, people who compile dictionaries, people who are associated with education in the production of textbooks, in the production of academic books, etc., etc. All these people are people who are designated, and they are the ones who popularize and who try to say that this is the form of English, that is internationally intelligible. In fact, all the grammar that we are studying, all the pronunciation that we are studying in our own English classes, they are examples of standard English. Okay, standard English, and we are trying to acquire, we are trying to master that form of English. Okay. Now, even though we call this standard English, and there are at least 5 countries where English is spoken as the mother tongue. We have England, we have America, we have Canada, we have Australia, we have New Zealand, and places like that. But even there, not all people speak standard English, or all people use standard English. Why? Because they are comfortable with their own local varieties of English, and only when they want to publish something, for example, or only when they are in class, or only when they are associated with educational activities, will they have to resort to standard form of English. But we have to know, even in England, not many people speak, not many in the sense, not a large number of people don't speak standard English. But there are people in all countries all over the world, as I said a little earlier, who speak this form of English, and therefore they are able to engage in activities, academic activities, which have universal significance. Okay. Now, but although we say that not we don't have a large number of people speaking standard English within each country, but all kinds of all kinds of publications, for example, all kinds of academic work, for example, they are conducted in this form of English. Say, for example, if you are writing a thesis, if you are doing a project, for example, if you are writing something for a magazine, for example. So in all these areas, you will have to use the standard form of English. Okay. Now, another point about standard English is that standard English is a dialect. It is one form of English, but it is not an accent. Okay, it is not an accent. Meaning, standard English, when you say standard English, don't be under the impression that people who speak standard English have a particular kind of accent. No, standard English is the educated use of English, but it doesn't mean that it is a kind of accent, it is a way of pronunciation. No, it is only a dialect, one form of English. Now, let us remember all the prime ministers that we have had. Okay, starting from Nehru till today, we have so many prime ministers. They have all spoken on forums, on international forums, and you have their speeches, okay, and you can listen to their speeches on the television or maybe on YouTube. When you listen to them, you find that all of them do not speak English in the same way. Okay, they have their own regional features sometimes. Okay, they have their own regional features, but still they are understood and they are speaking on international forums. Okay, they are speaking on international forums, but they are all understood by people representing various countries. Why? Because it's not the accent that is important, but it is the language that is used, the form of English that is being used, that is important. And on such forums, all people would like to use the standard form of English, that is standard English. Therefore, they are understood. And that is more important. An accent, you can speak standard English in your own accent. Okay, you can speak or you can use standard English in your own accent, in your own accent. So it is not an accent. It's not an accent, but it is a dialect. Okay. One more thing is that the word standard does not mean better. Standard English should not be considered as something superior to, okay, something superior to the other dialects of English. No, it doesn't mean better. Okay, it doesn't mean better. Standard English is not a better form of English. Okay, it's not a better form of English. Okay, it only means, okay, most frequently used by educated people. Okay, that's the only meaning. Most frequently used by educated people. Now that's the only meaning. Don't consider standard English as something superior to other dialects, because in our own regions we are comfortable with our own forms of English. Okay, forms of English. Only when we address a larger audience do we have to use this kind of English, standard form of English. Otherwise, our own forms of English are they do work. Okay. One more thing is standard English will be understood. Standard English will be understood better. Okay, standard English will be understood better when it's written down. Okay, when it is written down, and that is why when you read books published from various parts of the world in English, or articles published in magazines, okay, there you find a clear expression of the standard English form. Okay, the standard English form. So all academic books, all kinds of speeches, or the written forms of speeches, for example, uh, delivered on international forums, there you find the actual use of the standard English form. Now, I have a few more minutes, and I shall try to summarize some of the characteristic features of standard English, and then I will end this discussion with that. Now, again, this is the well-known linguist Peter Stevens who describes the characteristic features of standard English. Now, it's in a way a summary of what I have said so far, and I hope I will be able to complete this in another 10 minutes or so. So Stevens says that standard English has not only Stevens, there are other writers also. Okay, there are some other writers also who are simpler to understand. For example, Peter Trudgell is one person who has written extensively about accent. Then we also have Jean Hanna, another person who has written about international English. So these are some of the writers who have written well about standard English. Now I shall summarize these points, and then maybe we can conclude the lecture there. One is, it is used by educated people who make use of English all over the world, not in Britain alone. So standard English is not a property of England only. Okay, why? Because there are people who speak standard English, who use standard English in England, but there are people who use standard English all over the world. Therefore, it's not Britain's property alone. Okay, it is not Britain's property alone, but it is, seen all over the world. It is used by educated people all over the world, not only in England. Point one. Now, the other thing is, wherever it is used, standard English shows virtually no geographical or social variation. This is another thing. Wherever it is used, okay, no regional, meaning geographical, no geographical features are found. So if we are using standard English in our country, Indian English peculiarities won't be found there. Okay, so it has, as I told you, it has to be internationally intelligible, and therefore regional features may not be found. Okay, regional features may not be found. Wherever it is used, it shows virtually no geographical or social variation. Yeah, this is one thing. Third, standard English may be spoken with an accent from any geographical locality or with a non-regional accent. Now, this also I explained with the example of our prime ministers who have spoken on international forums. Standard English can be spoken with a regional accent, our own accent, or with a neutral accent. Okay, or with a neutral accent. So if you listen to students who study in very good English medium schools in the cities of India, you will notice that there is some kind of a uniformity in their speech, and it's not easy for us to identify them, or it's not easy for us to identify the region from where they come just by listening to the way they speak English. Okay, so it can be a neutral form of accent. Okay, it can be a neutral form of accent, or it can be a regional form of accent. But there is no restriction as such. You have to speak standard English in a peculiar way, using a peculiar accent. That kind of restriction is not there. Okay. Now, standard English, another point, fourth point, standard English has been universally accepted in the English-speaking world as the only appropriate model for educated use and also for educated use. So, in the field of academics, okay, or academic writing and academic activities, the form of English that is used is the standard English form. Okay, so this is the case where English is the mother tongue. This is the case where English is a second language, or this is the case where English is a foreign language. Now, another reason why this has become so popular is this, that is, it is the variety of English that has been the most comprehensively studied and described. Okay, so we have a large number of grammar books available now, starting from Nesfield or even before that, and coming up to the latest writers of grammar. You notice that all of them are concerned with the grammar of standard English. Okay, standard English. Of course, there are dialectal studies. That is different. Okay, that is different. People who study about different dialects of English. Say, for example, we have a large number of books on Indian English. Okay, we have a large number of books on Indian English written by Indian scholars, the features, etc., etc. But otherwise, this is a part of dialectology, where you study different dialects of the same language and the features of those dialects, regional variations. But here, you notice that the other grammar books that we study, mostly in schools and colleges, they are all based on the standard form of English. Okay, that is where the prescriptive grammarians say that this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. Okay, the descriptive grammarians are not so strict, but prescriptive grammarians are always like that. Okay, so they would say this is wrong and this is right. Okay, whereas modern grammarians would say, this is acceptable, this is unacceptable. Okay, this is unacceptable. Okay, so they are softer in their approach towards grammaticality. So this is the most widely described. And look at the dictionaries written. Okay, the dictionaries that are compiled by various Cambridge Dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, Collins Dictionary, then Webster's Dictionary. In all these dictionaries, what they try to do is to study the standard English form and the words which are used. So that's why you see, if you are looking up a word in these dictionaries, you will find that certain words are unacceptable. Okay, unacceptable, especially in Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English. They mention this unacceptable, or even all the dictionaries would say certain words are taboo, which cannot be used publicly. Certain words are colloquial. Certain words are, slang expressions or slang words. So this way you find, different, what you call um, uh, what was I saying? Okay, so we have different dictionaries. Okay, and from the dictionary, we are able to identify which are formal words, which are informal words. Okay, which are words which are taboo, which are words which, what are the words which are unacceptable, colloquial, slang, etc., etc. Why these kinds of description? These kinds of description because there are certain words which you cannot include in standard English form. Okay, they have to be excluded. Okay, they have to be excluded. And in standard English form, there are notions of politeness, notions of correctness. Okay, and so many other things. Okay, so many other things. So this is the most comprehensively studied variety of English. You have dictionaries. Okay, you have grammar books, and we have so many other uh, uh, descriptions of standard English all over the world. And also, it is the dialect of literature. Okay, it is the dialect of literature. This is slightly questionable because um, people who write novels, people who write dramas, they use standard English in their, fiction, in their drama or whatever. Only when they have to use the speech of certain characters. I'll give you one example. Those who have read Mark Twain's uh, Huckleberry Finn, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, there is a character called Jim. You know, the narrative part of the novel is in the standard form of English. But when it comes to the speeches of certain characters, say, for example, Jim, the slave in that novel, when he speaks the African American dialect of English, okay, which is slightly difficult to understand. Now, it is necessary, okay, it is necessary because in that novel, Jim is a character who speaks that kind of English because he is of African American origin and he is also a slave. So that kind of slave dialect, okay, and African American dialect is used. But otherwise, the remaining part of the novel, wherever the narrator is narrating the story, you have standard English usage. Another example will be Mulkraj Anand's Untouchable or Raja Rao's Kantapura. There you see, lots of Indian expressions, Indian phrases, etc., etc. there. But still, I don't know how you will look at some of the novels written in English by Indians, where they are not using standard English always. They try to, recreate our own grammatical features in their writing and then make it sort of acceptable to the rest of the world. Okay, I have a novel like the God of Small Things in mind. Okay, and Kamlagar sir may be able to say more about this. So that is the sixth characteristic. That is, even by writers of literature generally, on the whole, uh, they try to use the standard form of English because novels also have wide circulation all over the world. So we read African novels, we read Caribbean novels, we read novels written in some other part of the world, but still we understand because the narrative part at least is in the standard English form. So, to sum up what I have said so far, I can say that English has different varieties, like any other language of the world. Because it is spoken, it's being spoken by people all over the world. Uh, it's quite natural that it should have hundreds of varieties. And these varieties are dialectal varieties belonging, because they are being used in different regions of the world or different countries of the world. But even though we have so many different varieties of English, even though we have so many varieties of English, uh, there is one variety of English which cuts across all these dialectal boundaries, which have some, for some reasons, have acceptance all over the world, and that internationally intelligible form of English is considered as the standard English form. And standard English does not mean that it is a better form of English than the other varieties of English. It only means that it is widely used in educated speech or in the language of education. Now, it also has support because that is the kind of English which is used by powerful agencies like national networks or uh, the press, um, educational institutions, academic activities, learned professions. In all these areas, this is the kind of English that is being used. Therefore, it has wide currency. But that does not, I would like to repeat, it does not mean that you should speak standard English using an accent which is typical and which is particular, which is different from other kinds of pronunciation. No, you can speak standard English using your own accent, but it has to be the grammar, the vocabulary, and the other features of language that should conform to the international standard. Now, in addition to this, although we talk about standard English, every country has its own standard. Say, for example, in England, they have something called a received pronunciation, which is the phonetics that you are studying, the phonetics of RP you are studying. And similarly, in America, they have network English or general American English, which is the national standard, which they hear on Voice of America or American television. In India, also, we have a national form. At least we can say that whatever we hear on Doordarshan, the kind of news that is being read, etc., etc. Of course, you may find some Indian expressions there also, but otherwise, that is our kind of standard English here in India. So every country has that form of standard, but otherwise, internationally intelligible variety is one, and that is the standard English. That's all I have to say. I would like to thank you for your patient listening. In fact, more and more studies are coming up in this area, especially in the post-colonial uh, setup. But I wouldn't like to, deal with all that just because I only wanted to explain the concept to you, and that also requires a little more time. Therefore, I would like to conclude, and I thank Dr. Kamalagan Bhatt and his colleagues in the department, and I would like to thank the students for your patient hearing. And I think somebody was asking about the books which are necessary for this. In fact, we have uh, uh, Mrinmay is asking whether I can suggest some grammar books for standard English. Now, almost all the grammar books that you are studying is based on uh, uh, standard English, including Nan Martin grammar book or English grammar for today or university grammar of English. In fact, we have a very big book, okay, a very big book which is written by Randolph Kirk and five others. Okay, it is now published by Pearson, and it is not very costly. Okay, it costs only 700, 800 rupees, but it runs into some 2,000 pages or so. It is called A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language. A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language. The same person who wrote the book, A University Grammar of English, which was a prescribed textbook some time back. Uh, and there is an intermediate form of book between University Grammar of English and Comprehensive Grammar of English that is called Grammar of Contemporary English, a Grammar of Contemporary English. So we have so many books, and so far as varieties of English are concerned, we have Peter Stevens's book, and we have uh, Peter Trudgill and Jean Hanna, they have written a book called International English. International English. You only have to type standard English, bibliography on standard English. You will come across a large number of books, and many of them are written by Indians. Okay, many of them are written by Indians. So um, I would like you to uh, choose some of them, and maybe some of the books are available online, and I would like you to read them also. So, thank you. I enjoyed being with you, and if at all there is any uh, sort of difficulty, or if you have not understood something, of course, you can speak to me personally. My phone number is maybe there in the department. You can always talk to me on the phone. So, thank you so very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Let's have a lot of things. On behalf of the English department and the organizing team, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made today's program a resounding. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest heartfelt gratitude to the most honorable principal of the Ahmed Nagar College, Dr. R.J. Bernabas, for his unwavering support and encouragement throughout this endeavor. I would like to express our sincere appreciation to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Simon Bernabas, for sharing his insight and enriching our discussion. I would also like to extend our gratitude to the head of the English department, Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt, for his guidance and leadership. He has always been supportive and encouraging to have this kind of guest lecture, which is a privilege for us. And we, as a first year student, are glad to be here for this valuable guest lecture. To all participation, both online and offline, your presence and engagement made this event truly memorable. Thank you for your enthusiastic participation. A big shout out to Sir Gaurav Mishal and Mr. Atharva for their exceptional work in handling the online live streaming, ensuring that our virtual audience could fully participate in the dialogue. A round of applause for our diligent event comparers, Sifali sister and Jessica sister, for their professional handling of the pro, 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 of the proceeding. Last but not least, a heartfelt thank you to all the dedicated staff members of the English department whose hard work and commitment behind the scene made this event possible. Once again, thank you to everyone for your contribution and participation. We look forward to many more enriching dialogue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless. God bless.
Simon sir, thank you very much. We'll have
Thank you,
you
sir. Thank
again soon. Yeah. Okay.
you.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.